Cristina, we are so grateful to have you here with us and to have this conversation in a moment that we know is so critical. I'm always grateful for your leadership and your wisdom, and now more than ever, this entire room, the folks watching, the folks who will get the chance to read your book following today, we all absolutely need it. So speaking of joy, I want to start off with a moment that I know injected a lot of hope for us that we were desperately looking for. Let's talk about Election Day on Tuesday. Now, I'm not going to make this specifically political because I can't, but there were some major victories for DEI. There were some major victories for immigrants. And I'm thinking specifically of Mayor-elect Mamdani in New York, who in his speech said this will be a city that continues to be powered by immigrants, right? Continue to be a safe haven for immigrants, and is now led by an immigrant.
Yes.
And we know that this conversation is about justice broadly and not just about immigration, but I'm wondering what message are you hoping people get from his victory and others' victories, and who are you hoping gets that message?
Well, thank you for that question, and so wonderful to be with all of you here, and for making my book and my story available for people coming, just from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. So, to this question, I was sharing this a little bit last night when we were celebrating all of the awardees. So much of what we hear in the media or hear elected officials and our other leaders talk about, Black communities, Latina communities, Muslim communities, it's so much about trying to take away our sense of humanity, our dignity, our agency, and to instill doubts about our worth, doubts about our, rights to access, to belong. And so much of that really chips at your spirit. And so when I heard Mamdani said that, I was crying as a kid that grew up also in New York City. I had this moment of thinking, my gosh, an immigrant kid from Queens has now been just elected to be the next mayor of New York City. This immigrant kid from Queens feels like so in awe right now. And I'll tell you why, Raina, because I think it's important to look at the trajectory to your question about who I hope hears the message that he shared on Victory Night. After 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I was in high school. I was in high school and I was a senior. And what I remember from that time is the pain and the heartbreak of that tragedy and the lives lost. And also I remember immediately moving into a new world for immigrant and Muslim communities in New York and across the country, where we were being targeted and seen as a threat, a national security threat. The Department of Homeland Security gets built and created. The ICE agency that now has all these agents across the country gets boosted, gets set up, gets more resourced. So, and our Muslim neighbors and many of the immigrant neighbors in New York City started disappearing to deportation. So there's some parallels to what we see today. The hate crimes against communities increase, particularly against Muslim communities. So the kind of fear, like that eerie fear that you feel in the rooms and in the subway, when I remember growing up in New York City. And what has taken to this moment is the community work that many of us do in our communities. It's been the organizing, the folks that were working to to empower and protect and defend Muslim communities in New York City and immigrant communities. And then there was Occupy Wall Street. And then there's been all of these movements and organizing in New York City that has created the conditions for us to be able to have someone like him not only share the story, but really fight back on things like Islamophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment. So his story, who he is, and his message, what I hope is that remind us as immigrants in a moment where they're trying to tell us that we don't belong, and that we're not wanted. My hope is that we hear that as that we do belong, we do have power, and together we can be more powerful to create change.
Absolutely. What's the message that you're hoping the haters hear?
That we are here and we won't go anywhere. You know, I think, I talk about this in the book, Brittany. Part of what I wrote about in Dreaming of Home is this very alive contradiction in me about loving this country and feeling this is home, because it is. And it is here in this country, with the good and the bad, where I have found community, where I have found my voice, where I have found my purpose, and where I have met people fighting for justice. And it is also here where I have experienced racism and discrimination and oppression and racial profiling, and have been so close to losing my loved ones to deportation, including my own husband. And so I constantly am in this place of wanting this country to see me, to want me, to love me, but at the same time feeling so upset that I wanted to do that when I feel so rejected and so unwanted. So my hope is that, the haters know that there is an America made of everyday people, like many of us here, all of us here and outside of this room, who are committed to the vision of a multiracial democracy where we all belong.
That's right.
And that we are far more powerful and far more many and too many than they are.
That's right.
And that there's a lot more power in that.
That's right. I want to come back later to this idea about your dual feelings about America, because I'm very sure that there are other folks in the room who have felt that sentiment, feel that sentiment, and there is power in connecting with one another, right? So I want to come back around to that. But, you speak of this moment, you speak about the fact that there are more of us than there are of them, and I firmly believe that. And Tuesday gave us the buoyancy of some of that hope, and then you wake up on Wednesday, you go about your day, and you open up your phone or a newspaper, and you see that in Chicago, which has been besieged by federal presence, by ICE presence. We know the Black Hawk Down helicopter, where people rappelled like they were in enemy territory into a residential apartment building, separating Black people from Latina people in vans and disappearing them, right, as you talked about last night. So we already know that this is the backdrop of Chicago. And Wednesday morning, after that beautiful night on Tuesday, you wake up to find out that ICE has detained and disappeared a childcare worker inside of a daycare. Inside of a daycare. While we were all gathered here talking about children and their futures, one of the people who cares for them was carted away after being profiled and abused in front of them, causing lifelong trauma, while we were here trying to figure out what the path forward looks like together on their behalf and with them. So talk to me about that juxtaposition, because in this moment of hope, we're drawn immediately back. I'm sure you're drawn immediately back to what's happening in this country right now, especially for your community.
It's so hard, and I'm sure that all of us may resonate with, every day just going through so many highs and lows and feeling like we're just taking it a day at a time. And so, sometimes I think people expect that leaders and or organizers or people in community can always bring us hope and can always be like, it's gonna be all right, and we gonna be, And I think that is a role of leadership, of leading in uncertain times. But I also believe that the role of leadership and all of us as community workers, advocates, organizers, is to also be honest and be sober about the moment that we're facing. And I think for me, it is so important that we do face this moment in a way that recognizes that people in this country who are in power right now in our government are using immigrants, are using lies about crime to build an authoritarian regime. And the way that these agents are being deployed and are being used without no accountability, violating, by the way, every law.
That's right.
Every law. Because schools, under the law, are supposed to be safe zones. They're not supposed to go near schools. They're not supposed to go near churches. They don't care. And, so I think for me, it's so important that, yes, it feels hard, it feels overwhelming, but we got to be sober about what we're facing. Because from being sober about what we're facing, I think strategy and solutions and how we move through it and we'll be able to get to the other side of this moment will happen. So to this question of what we do, I think it's important to be witnessed. We can't look away. Because that will take our humanity away.
That's right. That's right.
That will take our humanity, and that's what they want. But when we start losing that touch and that connection to our heart, to our humanity, to us feeling for those children that saw their care working being pulled by two masked ICE agents who kept screaming, "I have papers. Let me show them to you." And they violently put him in a car and kept going in and out of this daycare. Or I saw images from LA where they took out a dad from a car and his daughter was in the car seat. Two agents with guns that you will only use in a war setting got into the car with this toddler and drove away with the toddler in the car.
That's right.
So let's be sober about how our own government is deploying law enforcement against civilians without any respect for the law or status or citizenship. I know we're going to talk about that later too. But the way that the way for me that I see a path forward is that just like we're seeing this level of terror and inhumanity and attacks, we are seeing people from all walks of lives taking a stand. Yeah. And just as those images were getting socialized in social media and in neighborhood chat groups and in signals and WhatsApps, thousands of parents showed up, held a rally last night in Chicago. There's going to be more rallies and more actions in the next few days. And these are people that may have not thought of themselves as folks that understood what's happening with immigration or with immigrant communities. So people are taking action, not only by getting to know their rights, but also saying, this is how I'm going to protect and defend my immigrant neighbor. This is how I'm going to protect and support my care worker. We're going to have plans. We're going to have signal chats. I'm going to show up and I'm going to be witness and I'm going to record and I'm going to submit complaints and I'm going to protect my community and my neighbors from it. So that's where I see the hope. And then the last thing that I will say is that, for many years, in the work that I've done with United We Dream and in immigrant communities across the country, so much of what we've been saying is that the conversation about immigration and about our policy is so racialized. This system and these laws are so rooted in anti-Blackness. And truly, when you look at the history of how our laws were established, like, we had open borders until 1920. Anyone could come. And then in 1920, you see this first law that is established, designing quotas, allowing people that were considered to be the better immigrants, which were Northern Europeans. And then the rest of us were the bad immigrants that couldn't come, that were undesirable. That's how our system was established. So then there's no surprise that we can say no to refugees from Haiti, but yes to white South Africans.
Talk about it.
Right? So for me, the hope is that we're finally really facing a moment where there's just no more hiding. That this is a system rooted in anti-Blackness and systematic racism. And so for all of us fighting for racial justice, for economic justice, for human rights, that there's just like a bigger tent of all of us that can join this fight and this movement.
It's easy to look at this political moment and assume that this is a partisan problem. And yet, you founded United We Dream, which has become the largest youth-led immigrant organization in the country. You founded that organization in 2008, when we were also feeling some electoral victory and hope, right? And so you've gone toe-to-toe with Democratic presidents, with Republican presidents, with members of all parties in Congress. You talk about the roots of this being anti-Blackness, and this feels like such, not only a bipartisan problem, but an American problem. How do we help people dig in and really understand not just what's at stake, but how we got here? Because if we understand how we got here, we can begin to understand that this is all our issue.
I think that just sharing stories is so important, Brittany. Because when you look at the folks that are getting targeted right now, it's Black, brown folks, immigrants and non-immigrants. And the more that we can share those stories in our communities, I think the more that we're going to be able to see beyond what we sometimes perceive about a particular issue. I mean, this is why, as an organizer, I never thought of myself as a writer. I never really had in my bucket list to write a book. And trust me, after taking 5 years to write this book, I'm like, oh my God. Can't believe I did that. I didn't know what I was committing to when I said, I'm going to write it. But the reason why I thought it was important to write this story is because in my work as an organizer, the biggest thing I realized that now is backed by data, by the way, is that as people, we are heart first. We're emotional beings first. And the way that we connect with one another and understand the world and make meaning and understand the level of complexity of policy and politics is actually done through story. And so I think that sharing our stories is going to be really important. Two, as we have forces in this country that are trying to erase history and take away legitimate facts about
Never
slavery,
thought we'd be arguing about those, right?
about Jim Crow, about the farm worker movement in California and in the Southwest, and as they're banning books across the country, and I'm like, I won't be surprised if my book gets to be on a banned book list very soon. But so the more important it is for us to learn about our history as a country, for us to make those connections, and for us to do the kind of community work that all of our people have access to, that history, and to continue to fight for our right to our history and our stories, and for that to be part of what America is about too.
Well, let me tell you right now, I got a lot of friends on the banned book list, and every time they get banned, their sales go through the roof. So don't worry about it, girl. Let them ban you. We'll buy it. We'll share it. We'll give it out to the young folks. Don't you worry about that. We got you. But you talk about sharing stories, and when you started United We Dream, it goes from this small coalition to a member-based organization of over 1 million young people. And part of the birth of this is the organization really having young people decide to share that they are undocumented, just as you had done a few years before. That is an incredibly risky move, right? When we're talking about sharing these stories, we're not talking about little innocent, heartwarming stories to everyone. We're talking about things that put people in grave danger. What are the policy lessons you've learned from using storytelling as a foundation to then pushing back and getting some real important legislative wins for not just the immigrant community, but for young people broadly?
You know, I also share that storytelling also gets at supporting and empowering young people to tap into their agency and their voice when everything around us is telling us that we have no voice and that we have no power. So it's not like soft tactic to do the storytelling work. Because for young people of color in particular who have been silenced, but our culture, our systems, our policies, some of our institutions, the act of storytelling with one another and in community, it's so empowering. I mean, I think about me when I thought, like, as an immigrant, I should just stay in the down low, don't bring attention to myself. I don't deserve to be here. I have no rights. And then sharing stories with other undocumented young people or students in the City University of New York who were children of immigrants but were having the same challenges about paying for tuition, having to work and take care of family and go to school, and why does it have to be this hard? And I realized that it wasn't just about immigration status, right? But it helped us find our voice and tapping into our power. And so the power of storytelling, I think of this as like the power of culture, really, because through story and through narratives, we're really creating the conditions for better policies and policy breakthroughs. Yes. I'll tell you this, in the early 2000s, you have a whole bunch of undocumented young people who are afraid, who are facing deportation. Many of them have lost their family members to deportation. And we had a lot of hopes that under the Obama administration, things will change. Some things change. And I think it's important to recognize that. And some things stay the same. Like the targeting of deportation of students and families still continue. And if it had not been for a movement of young people who started sharing our stories, who started to coming out as undocumented and unafraid, but also for our allies, educators and faith leaders and advocates also sharing their own stories for why they were with us, I don't think that we would have gotten to winning DACA in 2012. That's right. Because it was the stories that allowed us to really not only paint a picture of the challenge of undocumented young people and families that were living under the fear of deportation every day, but it also allowed us to paint a picture of the vision and the dreams that young people have. Dreams of living without fear, dreams of going to school, dreams of going to college, dreams of being free. And to have a collective of young people from coast to coast share that with policymakers, with community leaders, with institutions, with colleges and universities, it just created a moral and a cultural imperative that something had to be done. So the stories really allowed us to create the conditions for it to feel impossible not to take action. Yeah. Yeah. So it was really, when I think about the ingredients, I feel like this was really a special ingredient in our work that obviously you layer with members meeting with policymakers and doing the research and writing the policy briefs. All that is important. But when it's rooted in the experiences of people impacted, and those stories are the ones that are shaping the policy ideas, the conversation, and the debate, is when we create the openings for the kind of policy breakthroughs that we need.
Pushing for DACA, of course, was a tactical shift, right? So the DREAM Act doesn't pass in 2010, and the DREAM Act is something that is far more comprehensive because it's being passed by Congress versus DACA, which is an executive order, right? An administrative decision that we know can be overturned. But clearly, when we have to pivot, we figure out how to do that. One of the questions you have been asked a few times before is if pushing for DACA was a mistake, because there were people who took that victory and created a narrative about good immigrants versus bad immigrants, right? So these are the good immigrants. They're going to school, they're working, they want to be contributing members of society. And these are the bad immigrants, right, who aren't doing those things for whatever reason. Those people didn't care. And that narrative really took hold in a lot of places. Now, to be clear, over 800,000 people have received protective status through DACA. So that was a massive victory. Talk to me about holding those two realities when you have to be making strategic, tactical decisions that may not get everything that you want, but get some of what you want.
Such a good question and an important question for all of us who also work in this process of policy making and advocating for policy. Because I feel like, I have not gotten to a place in my trajectory where I feel like a piece of policy is reflective of everything that I want. Like, have you experienced the same? Raise your hand.
It's not just you, child.
Right? and so policy is like so imperfect in that way that it doesn't really get at everything that we need and the vision of the world that we have. And so I think that that's why it's important, like the policy does not become the vision, but we need to hold our vision, and the policy is part of like the vehicles and the tactics that we get closer and closer to our vision. And so for our movement, we always know we wanted a pathway to citizenship and protection. And by the way, also that citizenship does not guarantee
That's right.
that we will be okay. But it does provide a layer of protection, of legal protection, that if you don't have it, leaves you at a greater risk. So we've always known that we wanted our communities to be free, to live without fear, to be able to thrive and accomplish dreams. And the DREAM Act in itself was a very imperfect policy.
Yeah.
I mean, the requirements of the policy were that people had to be these like superstar students and, be proof that you either were going to be able to go to college or were in college. And so it already left out so many working class and poor immigrant students. So it was imperfect. But it had a promise of protecting close to 2 million people, young people. But when we realized that we were not going to be able to get the votes needed in Congress to be able to do that, the choice in front of us as advocates, community leaders, organizers was, you'll either keep pushing for something that you know you don't have the power to achieve, or we make a strategic decision to protect at least some people in the community. And it's still a lot of pride about that choice. I will tell you that I feel it was not a mistake to say that if we could win protections for at least 1 million people, that will help us build more power so that we can continue to fight for more. But that was better than nothing. So it's all imperfect. It's like we're dealing with these impossible choices. But this is why the strategy and the strategic choices are so important. And the truth is that when we are sharing our stories, our stories were co-opted. And again, this is the power of community and the people impacted really owning our voices and our stories. Because then they were co-opted by policymakers to create the distinction between immigrants that deserve protection, immigrants who did not. I mean, it even created, under the first Trump administration, I remember having a conversation with some policymakers who many of us here in this room will think are our allies. And they said, well, what if we negotiate a policy that would charge your parents, Cristina, as smugglers because they came with you when you were a child? But that way we get to protect the children.
My God. Imagine
that conversation. And then us saying, hell no.
Right.
That's not going to happen. Yeah. So, but our stories were used to advocate for policy moves like that. So we have to be really careful and paying attention for how our stories and the experiences of our communities could be co-opted for a different purpose.
That's right.
And what we have done is a lot of work to fight back on that. Sharing all the complexity of stories. The stories of young people that want to go to college, the stories of young people that are looking for other ways and have other dreams. And that's okay. And the young people that have also made mistakes because they're young people. Like young people, not paying the subway. Like when you are taking the train in New York City, which many of us do for fun, for those of us that have grown up in New York City. But when you're an immigrant, that can get you deported. So, so not only the expansion of the stories and the complexity of who we are as people and as communities, but more than anything, to say no when we have to. To walk away from that negotiating table or that policy discussion conversation when we have to, for the rights, for the protection of our communities. And then the last thing I will say, some people, even people who have received DACA and the immigrant youth movement, sometimes have shared with me the feeling of guilt that they have. That some of us were protected and others did not. And that those that got protection went on to accomplish their dreams. And many of them went to medical school. Many of them went into fashion. Many of them opened their business. Many of them decided to study abroad, which they could now. And I cannot tell you the countless of conversations that I've had with these young people to say, there's no shame in that. This policy win, it was a collective win of our movement, was meant to exactly do that, so that you can accomplish the dream of going to a university, so that you can accomplish the dream of opening up your business. And so I will stand firmly to say that the millions of lives, because it was not just the DACA recipients, it was their families. All the research that we did to study the impact of DACA, 90% of young people reported getting better jobs, getting better educational opportunities. 98% reported being able to help their families out financially. Over 80% of them reported being able to have access to healthcare for the first time. For the first time. And helping their families get loans to buy homes, get cars, get loans to open up businesses for their families. So the ripple effect, when I think about it, is that DACA in itself was an anti-poverty program.
Wow, wow.
Because there was economic mobility here in the room for poor people and families that have been in the margins and told that they don't deserve more and better, right? So the millions of lives that have been touched and that have been transformed by that, no one is going to take that away from us.
That's right.
And the last thing is, no one is going to take from us the moments where a lot of these young people were able to travel back to the countries where they were born and meet their grandparents for the first time. Or be able to go and say the last goodbyes to their abuelas and their abuelos or their grandparents that they had only seen via phone for years. And that moment, no one can take that away from us.
Yeah, wow. So after this question, we're going to open it up to your questions, so make sure you're getting those ready. But before we do that, you spoke a bit to the weaponization of narratives. And, you know, we always have very honest conversations with each other. So let's have this here. One of the narratives that we have seen be weaponized against a movement that should be allied across racial identity is that your people, and I'm using big air quotes here, voted for this. And so I'm hearing folks in my community say, that's a FAFO situation. You're gonna have to figure it out on your own. We're not chiming in. There have been plenty of folks in both of our communities and our racial background who have defied that, right? And have been down for one another powerfully. And yet we see that narrative taking hold so much and threatening the opportunities of solidarity that we know are crucial to our collective liberation. Lilla Watson says, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because you know our fates are bound up with one another's, then let us work together, right? So here we are in this moment where we're talking about citizenship. Birthright citizenship, as you mentioned, and as we were talking backstage, was not actually created around conversations about immigration. It was created in conversations around formerly enslaved Black people, right? It was created to supposedly preserve our ability to engage in the world as citizens. So before we open it up to questions quickly, I just want to hear from you how we get past those weaponized narratives to be down for each other, because that's the only way we are collectively going to win.
Yes, to that. I agree, and I will say, here's where I feel like folks that are perpetrating all of this terror right now are just exposing how we're in this together. How citizenship doesn't really mean the same thing for white folks and people of color.
That's right.
Because when they went to that building, that residential building in Chicago, you had longtime Black residents of Chicago who are U.S. citizens that were in that building that were targeted equally as the Latino and Latina immigrants that were in that building. So this is why I feel like when we talk about belonging and who is an American in this country, who gets to be an American, who is defining that? Who gets to have all the protections that our Constitution lays out? Let's be real. That's not for everybody, and particularly the Black community in this country knows that very well. And so for me, it's been even more critical now to do the work in our communities. Because I will tell you, in immigrant communities and in Latina communities, anti-Blackness, it's also part of what has held back the community. To see the connections. And I remember I remember when Amadou Diallo was shot and killed in New York City by NYPD.
Yeah.
And I was a young person. And I knew that there was something wrong. But in immigrant and Latina communities, people said, oh, he must have been creating some trouble. And that's why this happened. So this is not about us, but it's about them. And when they were going after Muslim communities, oh, you know, those are the folks that have the terrorists that, you know, were part of this 9/11 attack. And so this is not about us. But then when my husband was detained and taken to a detention facility in upstate New York and was close to being deported, what he found is Muslim and Latino men were the majority in that jail. So this idea that for Latinos and Latinas, or who believed at that point that it wasn't about us because it was about Muslim communities. So wrong. So I think that for me, the work that we have to do is that some of us, are in leadership, and we may see eye to eye and get all the analysis and see the connections and know that our histories and our futures are so connected. But sometimes people in our memberships of our organizations or in our community have not gotten there. Yeah. So there is a responsibility that all of us hold, and that I keep telling in my community we have to take seriously, to talk about anti-Blackness in the community. To talk about the way that colonialism has created this idea for many of us immigrants from Latin America that we gotta strive to be white. We gotta strive to be the colonizer. When I was a child, people would tell me, you have to marry white to better the race.
Wow. Yeah.
In Ecuador. This is what adults in Ecuador were telling me.
Wow.
So when immigrants come here, there's already all of these seeds of lies and ideas about who we are and our worth. And unless we're able to transform that and to do it at a community level, at an individual level, at a community level, and this is what I tried to do in my book, because my hope is that for young people that are reading this, in some way or another, we have learned to hate ourselves and to feel ashamed of the skin color, of our hair, of our indigenous features, for some of us. Dreaming of Home is an invitation for young people to love ourselves as who we are. Yeah. To know that we're beautiful with the hair, with the skin, with the accents, with the histories and the cultures and our foods, all of that. Because if that personal transformation happens, I think we can make it a community process and community transformation. So it really starts at love. We love ourselves, we love our communities, I think we will be able to continue to deepen the level of solidarity that we need to say this is about all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. I see we've already got one up here. Make sure to raise your hand and someone with a mic will come to you.
Okay, I love this.
Girl, you've been asking good questions all week. Come on with it, we ready.
You did really good answering that last question. I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of that. So how do you suggest that we go about, I guess, decolonizing or deprogramming our mind when, like, in supporting and building community with and educating those immigrants and those people who voted for these mass deportations, but then their loved ones get affected by this, like they get impacted by it. So how do we go by decolonizing our minds, but assisting them, knowing like she said, we told you, like we knew this was gonna happen. So how do we go by supporting them? And like I said, you did kind of answer it, but I wanted to know like a bit more in depth, like how should we go about doing that?
And we like a book list around here. So besides your book, if you've got any other suggestions, give those too.
Yeah. Okay, so I would also share this because your point, thank you so much for sharing your commentary and your question. Because your question and your comment reminded me, as I've been traveling across the country, sharing Dreaming of Home with different audiences, most of them actually, people that are not involved in social justice work or change work. And I cannot tell you the countless of people of Latino and Latina heritage that have stood up in these events and cried and said how heartbroken they are that their family members voted for this madness. And asking me, how do you deal with that? And I'll tell you this, the book closed the editing process, so I didn't get to add this story in the book. But I also have family members that voted for Trump, who are children of immigrants, who have undocumented family members in their family. And I just want to name that, like, the kind of heartbreak and division that is happening in families is so deep. And there's like a Sufi quote, like a Buddhism quote, like the heart breaks and it breaks and it breaks and it breaks until it stays open. And I think about that because that helped me to be able to find openness in my heart to be able to see my cousins in the face again. And I share this with people, to your point, because I think that storytelling, again, like connecting at a human level. Why did these people vote this way? I had this conversation with my cousins. Why? Like, I want to understand. Share what's the pain, what moved you. And we won't be surprised, but the thing that moved my family was the economy. They're feeling like neither party was delivering for them. They feel they were struggling. They have families, they have children, they cannot pay the bills anymore. And they thought that this administration was going to bring something different. And so it was a lot about economic pain, and this is what, number one, you probably know this, Heather McGhee, some of us, right? She talks about how folks would vote against themselves because of racism.
She calls it drained pool politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because our colonialism doesn't also allow us to see how racialized these policies are, right? Second book for Latinos and Latina communities, Paola Ramos, Defectors. She really dives into this book on how Latinos and Latinas have this dream of European whiteness and how that holds them back from really connecting to what's happening and to how policies are targeted based on race and ethnicity, but also how we can get out of it and see the connections and build power together. And then the third thing I will say, my book talks about this in the way of how young people really early on learn these ideas. Like, ideas and stories are so powerful. But we can also, through other stories, we can deconstruct all of that. So how do we do that? Storytelling, sharing these books, having community education and popular education in our communities about this, about how the immigration system has been built, about the history of this country, about how colonialism has shaped much of our policy as well. And if we deconstruct that, ultimately, we can be able to see the bonds that bring us together through storytelling, through talking and speaking to heart. So for me, I think it's honesty, storytelling, and the information and the history that is going to be important for us to be able to do all of that work.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Other questions? You've got one right behind you.
Just kind of like a piggyback of what you were saying earlier. Because I have a mother who is a bit darker than I am, who is very much convinced she is not Black, very confused about that aspect. But how do you deal with the fact that your family members voted for Trump who may possibly be afraid of their own culture? How do you kind of cope with that and try not to lose yourself within all that?
So thank you for that question. We've got one more question over here. For time's sake, I'm going to take these back to back so you can answer together. Yes.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, Cristina. It was so great to meet you last night. I'm Juan Diaz, Policy Manager, Children's Defense Fund, New York. We are from the same town, right? We are from the same town in Quito, Ecuador. And thank you so much. I can speak for millions and millions of youth. I was formerly a documented immigrant. And when DACA passed and you were fully, leading this role, it gave us hope. Eventually I, gained status and gain education. My question is, as you know, different states have different experiences currently with the law enforcement, right? Children's Defense Fund has offices in New York, in Texas. How can state advocates throughout the nation unite and collaborate in advocacy?
So we've got one about making sure we protect our identity in the midst of all of this, and one about how advocates can collaborate across states to win.
I really think it is about politics, the discussions, the debates, but it's so much about culture. We're in a cultural war in many ways. And And the other side, I feel like there's folks that are really trying to take our pride away, our sense of self, our sense of humanity. So for me, the antidote to that is to bring pride to who we are, to bring love to who we are, and to exercise it. Because I will tell you that the heartbreaking thing that is happening right now, and I'll speak for Latino and Latina communities, people are getting really afraid of speaking in Spanish. The shame that is coming with it. And let's not forget the history of this country. Mexicans were lynched in Texas because they spoke Spanish. It's part of our history. So it continues to manifest itself. So for me, I think that the power to counter that and bring a different way of being in this moment is that it's just as important to have policy and advocacy conversations as it is to bring joy and to bring pride about our culture and our histories and our traditions, and to do it loudly in community with each other. Because when our joy and our pride for who we are goes away, they win. So I'm all here for that halftime Super Bowl coming up.
I know that's right. I hope not a single word of English is spoken.
And I'm all about organizing all people that don't even know or understand American football, me included. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna tune in. We're gonna have parties across the country. Because, these artists, Bad Bunny, what he's bringing to this community, it's pride about who we are. Our language, our music. And that is stronger than the walls, the targeting, all of these false narratives about who we are. So I think that the medicine right now that we need is joy, community, pride, celebration of who we are together, and to do that in loud and joyful ways. And I think to this question about the states, there's so much that states can do, and I'm happy to follow up as a resource in terms of connecting with many institutions and organizations that are thinking about all of the ways in which cities, I'm already thinking this about New York City and all my asks of the new administration for next year.
That's right.
Because cities and states can say, all of our schools are going to be safe zones. And they're going to be protected by our cities. You know what they can also say? Home Depot lots are going to be safe zones.
That's right.
In many states and cities, I just found this out about New York City, the Catholic Church apparently owns huge areas of real estate in the city. What can the Catholic Church do with their property? No eyes in this property.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of room through executive orders that cities can do, and the states can do the same. The states can really use the power at the state level and the city level and coordinate together to declare safe zones across the state in different institutions. And I think that is going to be one of the ways in which, I'm going to be real, we're not going to stop it. The bill that just passed at the federal level, $100+ billion that is going to ICE. It is the largest law enforcement agency in the entire country combined, bigger than the CIA, bigger than all of our federal agencies. And even more powerful than some countries' military in terms of money. So I just want to be sober that we may not be able to stop it all, but we can give them a harder time. And that's some of the ways that states and cities could do that.
Can we give Cristina a round of applause? What an incredible conversation. What an incredible leader you are. We are so blessed that you've spent some time with us. And now you understand why I said read the book. And you do not have to go to anybody's Amazon to buy it. We've got it for you.
Thank you. Thank you, CDF, for making the book available. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to close by saying this. The book is subtitled How We Turn Fear into pride, power, and real change. And real change. So to the young folks in the room, we will do exactly that. Turn our fear into pride, power, and real change. Cristina, thank you so much.